Hello, everyone. Thank you
Hi.
very much for joining us again for the next of our lessons from St. Mary's Sunday School. So, you may remember we actually, last time we recorded was 2 weeks ago, and that was a particularly significant day. We got ready to celebrate a particular significant day in the church's year, and we're going to talk through. We're going to pick up from there and talk through the next week to see what happened in the life of Jesus. You may remember several months ago that we actually showed you the story of the birth of Jesus with some wonderful painted rocks. Someone named Charlene does a wonderful job making painted rocks, and she shared this one with me, just like she shared a set at Christmas time with me as well. So we're going to tell that story of that next week that happened in Jesus' life with the pictures from these painted rocks. And then we're going to see where that story ends. So we're going to start with this rock here, and you'll all be able to see, of course, it looks like a branch, a leaf. Of course, it's a palm branch, right? So 2 weeks ago, we told the story of Palm Sunday, when Jesus came to the city of Jerusalem, the capital city in the country, and everyone greeted him as the king. They'd been waiting years and years and years and years and centuries and centuries and centuries to know and to see and to find, because he was going to come save the people. So everyone was excited. We finished up with that Palm Sunday story. Everyone excited to see Jesus, thinking he would come to save them. But then things got a little bit different that week, because you may remember, as the week unfolded, people discovered that Jesus wasn't going to be the kind of king they wanted him to be. He wasn't going to be a big military king and start a war and throw out the enemies. He was going to actually be a peaceful king who helped people to love God in their heart as well as in their lives. And so people began to turn against him. They turned away from him because he didn't do what they wanted him to do. And one of those that turned away from him was one of his followers, one of his close friends named Judas, Judas Iscariot. And those who were in charge, they paid him money. There's a bag of coins, 30 coins. They paid him money to betray Jesus, to betray his friend. So Judas took the bag of coins, the 30 coins, and he betrayed Jesus. But the night that Jesus was betrayed, Jesus got together with his closest friends and he had supper with them. In fact, he had a particular supper with them called the Passover. You may remember that we talked about the Passover when we were talking about the Moses story. Remember the last plague, just before the people of Israel, the Hebrews, were able to leave Egypt. They were able to go from Egypt, and but they had to rush. And so they had to have the bread
It
was
was
not
unleavened.
unleavened. Thank you very much. It didn't rise. It's a kind of flatbread, and that was a meal that the Hebrew people, the Jewish people, continue to have every year, just about this time of year, in fact. And so Jesus was having that meal with his disciples. But at that meal, he did some different things. He took a couple of things that were part of that meal, the bread, for example, and the wine that was used as part of that meal, and he gave it a very different meaning. And he said it wasn't just the bread of the Passover or the wine of the Passover, but the bread was going to be his body and the wine was going to be his blood. So the bread and the wine together were going to remind us about what Jesus did for us on the cross, what Jesus was going to do the next day for us. Also, a way for us to know that Jesus is with us when we celebrate Holy Communion, when we eat the bread and drink the wine. So that happened the night Jesus was going to be arrested. And after that meal, he went out to pray because, of course, the next day was going to be an incredibly hard day for him, the hardest day in his entire life, a day harder than we've ever had in our lives. And so Jesus went out to a garden and he prayed in the garden while he was in the garden with his disciples. And he prayed to the Father to make sure this is exactly what God the Father wanted him to do. And so Jesus accepted the Father's plan, and then the soldiers came to arrest Jesus. And they arrested him, they took him away, and they gave him a kind of trial. Not really a really formal trial, but a kind of trial. But not just Judas turned away from Jesus, because Jesus' followers, his friends, they all ran away as well. In fact, one of them, he followed, but he was so frightened that when people asked him if he was a follower of Jesus, a friend of Jesus, he said no. Didn't even know who he was. In fact, he said it 3 times, and at the end of that, the rooster crowed early in the morning. So it had gone all night. In the early morning, the rooster crowed, and Jesus had predicted and told this man, Simon Peter, that he would deny Jesus 3 times before the rooster crowed, and that's exactly what happened. And so after Jesus was tried and he was condemned to die, even though he was innocent, it was completely unfair. He was condemned to die. But of course, because people had thought he was the king, they thought they should make fun of him, right? So they put a crown on his head, but not a crown with gold and jewels, of course, but a crown made with thorns, with sharp thorns that would be incredibly, incredibly painful. So they gave him the crown of thorns on his head just to make fun of him, not because they thought he was a king. We believe he was a king, but they didn't think he was a king, but they wanted to make fun of him. And even some of the other parts of the story, the soldiers who had arrested him, the soldiers who were guarding him, they got to take his clothes, right? And they decided that rather than tearing him up into little bits, they were going to throw dice to determine who was going to get to keep Jesus' clothes, because of course he was going to die and he wouldn't need them anymore. So they threw dice to get Jesus' clothes, to figure out who would get them. And then, of course, they gave Jesus the cross. And Jesus actually had to carry the cross. In fact, in that picture, you can actually see Jesus wearing the crown of thorns on his head. And he's carrying the cross because they're going to put him to death on that cross. And that, of course, is a horrible thing to do to someone. It was an evil thing for them to do to Jesus. But Jesus accepted it because he knew that if he was willing to take that suffering on our behalf, then we would not have to suffer for our sins, that we could be forgiven. And so we have this image because we have the three crosses, because you may remember in the story what Jesus was put to death on the cross, the middle cross, but there were two thieves who were crucified with Jesus at the same time. They weren't part of Jesus' followers. They didn't even know Jesus before that day, but they were put to death at the same time with Jesus. And so after Jesus died, they took his body down from the cross, and they put him in a tomb, in a cave, a kind of cave, and they put a large stone over the mouth of the cave so that the followers of Jesus wouldn't come and try to take the body of Jesus away out of love for Jesus. And that's where that story finished on Friday. And that story, just a week ago, was a story that we call Good Friday. It's good, it seems like a strange thing to call it, because how can a day that when Jesus dies be good? But of course, we could all say it's good because it's because of Jesus' death on the cross that we have the hope that we don't have to suffer in the same kind of way for our sins and our mistakes. And then on Saturday, nothing happened. They just waited in fear and worry. But when they went early on Sunday morning to the tomb, they discovered when they got there that something was really unusual, because the stone was no longer over the mouth of the tomb. It had been rolled away, and they looked inside. You could see the sun coming up as well. They looked inside the tomb, and they saw the cloths that had been wrapped around Jesus' body when he died, but they didn't see the body of Jesus, so he wasn't there. And then shortly afterwards, they had a chance. They actually met Jesus alive, risen from the dead. And of course, no one was expecting that, because people don't normally come back from the dead. And they knew that Jesus not only had died for our sins, but actually he had conquered even death itself, because death wasn't the end for him. He was going to live forever because he rose from the dead. And that's the promise, of course, that we have in Jesus as well. So that's the story of that next week, from Palm Sunday through to Thursday, that Maundy Thursday, when Jesus celebrated that meal with his disciples, through Good Friday, through the following Saturday, and then on Sunday morning, the first Easter day. So it's the most important story in our lives, the most important story in my life, and we want to invite you guys to do a bit of a craft. You all know something about butterflies, and we're going to do a craft that involves butterflies, and then we're going to talk about why we would do a craft that involves butterflies when we talk about this particular story. And as always, we're going to start with the ever popular coffee filter. Absolutely. What did we? Do we actually use these?
You get to buy these in big packs, so you have lots of them to use.
Do we actually use these for coffee? I think we just use them for crafts, I think. So what I've done is
I don't drink coffee, so I don't know.
So what I've done, I've taken a coffee filter and just folded it in half, okay? And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut a little triangle, a little wedge out of the center part here. There's a little wedge there, and there's a little wedge there. So you can just see what I've done there. And of course, if you open that up, maybe it's going to begin to look like butterfly wings. Janice is going to do some coloring while I go and work on the other part of
my favorite kind of coloring. I don't have to stay in lines.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so what I've gotten here is a piece of toilet paper roll, or you could use a piece of paper towel roll, depending on whatever you have. This would make a really big butterfly. I'm going to work on this one and make a bit of a smaller one, but we're going to cover that. And so I've got a piece of greenish paper here, and I'm just going to cut it wide enough to cover the roll. There, so that will just take a second. There we go. I think that'll work there. There. Okay. There. Okay, I put that over there. I'll put the scissors down here. So there's my roll, and there's my colored paper. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to roll that up something like this, because this is going to be the body of our butterfly. And I'll get some tape to hold that in position. Hold that on. There we go. Straighten that up. And another piece of tape. Hold that in position. There. There we go. So there's the body of our butterfly. And of course, butterflies have antennae, I think we call that. And so we have some more craft stuff. This is pipe cleaner, isn't it? And you can do that, depending on your size, you can do that any length you want. We have other lengths. I think that if we were using the larger roll, it might work better with the larger piece there. But we're just going to use a small piece here, and we're just going to roughly fold it in half, just a little bit like that. Just leave a bit of a finger. There we go. A little finger width or so, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to tape that inside there. So I'm going to get a piece of tape here. There we go. Ooh. You are a quick colorer. Okay, so, and let's just put that right here. Actually, maybe I'll put it right here. There we go. Okay. There. So I've taped my antennae on. I think what I do with those, you just give them a little bit of a curl, make them look a little bit more like an antennae. There we go. We're getting there with the
more insect-like.
Looking a little more insect-like. And I think I'll take a marker here. I'm just going to draw eyes on, but you could also color eyes with something else and tape them on, or sometimes you can get craft eyes, can't you?
Googly eyes.
Googly eyes. So that would be neat as well. But we're just going to color a couple of eyes.
I actually think there are googly eyes over in the Sunday school supply at the church, but because of this construction, we don't easily get access to that.
Oh, there we go. Let's try and even that out. There we go. Okay, so there's our butterfly's eyes and our butterfly antennae. And now we're going to take this wonderful set of butterfly wings that Janice has prepared.
Yeah, I used markers, and I only had to color one side because the markers will seep through the coffee filter. But if you were using crayons or pencil crayons, you might want to color on both sides.
On both sides, exactly. So I'm just going to take that, and I'm going to hold that right.
Can I help?
You hold on to that. And that's going to work well.
Just the right size.
It is. There we go. And I think I'll do the top as well. See? There we go. There we go. Perfect.
Ready for the big reveal?
There we go. There's a pretty cool looking butterfly. But you may be asking yourself, why are we doing a butterfly craft when we're talking about the events from Palm Sunday? You can hang on to that. You need to name your butterfly. So, why are we doing a butterfly when we think about the Palm Sunday to Monday, Thursday, Good Friday, Easter Day story? Well, if you know something about butterflies, I suspect you know more about butterflies than I do. But butterflies, you may remember, come from caterpillars. Those fuzzy kinds of things that crawl along branches and leaves. And then caterpillars, when it comes time for them to take the next stage in their lives, they create a chrysalis, and they go inside the chrysalis, and they stay inside the chrysalis. It just seals them completely up because they're being changed. And so when they're ready, though, when they're ready to take that next step in their lives, that next stage, they come out of the chrysalis, and what was a fuzzy little caterpillar has now become a beautiful butterfly. And so we tell that story at Easter because, in a sense, it reminds us of something about Jesus, right? They took the body of Jesus. He was dead. They put it in the tomb. They put the stone over the tomb. But on the third day, on the Sunday morning when they came, he was no longer in the tomb. He was no longer dead. He'd come out of the tomb, and he was alive, just like a butterfly, in a sense, coming out of a chrysalis. And he was alive in a way that he was never going to ever have to die again. So that's the most important story, as I said. That's the most important story in Jesus' life. It's the most important story in my life because it tells me that nothing, there is nothing, nothing that is outside of God's power. Not even death, not sin, not the mistakes I make, not the mistakes you make, not the things you do that you shouldn't do, or the things I do that I shouldn't do. None of those things is more powerful than God's power to forgive us in Jesus and to give us new life in Jesus. And so the butterfly reminds me of that because of Easter Day, because Jesus rose from the dead and is going to live forever. And in Jesus, we have the promise of living forever as well. So I hope you guys enjoyed that craft to work on. I've got a couple of other things that we're going to send up via email as well, some things that you can work on. And we look forward to seeing you next week. In fact, I think even next week, we're going to come back to our Moses story. Remember, we were talking about Moses before, but we sort of took a step away because of Palm Sunday and Easter Day. So we're going to come back to our Moses story, I think, next week. So I hope you guys have a great week and see you then.
Bye, everyone.
Bye now.